You know, when you think of a pristine rainforest, you probably picture the ultimate safe haven for wildlife, right? Untouched, protected, safe. But what if it turns out they're not safe at all? A really puzzling and honestly alarming trend is coming out of these remote jungles, and it's forcing us to rethink everything we thought we knew about protecting nature. It all starts with a sound, or maybe more accurately, the lack of a sound. Field researchers, people who have literally spent decades of their lives in the Ecuadorian Amazon, have started to notice something strange. That vibrant, almost deafening dawn chorus of birdsong, it's fading. It's getting quieter. And this isn't just a hunch they have. It's our first major clue in a huge mystery. And that right there, that's the heart of it. If birds are disappearing from forests that are supposedly whole, I mean, no logging, no roads, no obvious destruction, then what invisible force is at play here? This is where we get to put on our detective hats, because this is a real ecological whodunit. Okay, so to really get what's happening down in the tropics, we first need to zoom out and look at the bigger picture. It turns out this quieted dawn chorus is actually an echo of a much larger alarm that's been going off for years. Check this out. A huge study back in 2019 dropped a bombshell. North America has lost almost 3 billion birds since 1970. That's nearly a third, 29% of the entire bird population, just gone. And when you dig into the numbers, you see it's not even across the board. Grassland birds have been hit the hardest, they're down over half. This tells us it's not just a few species having a hard time, it's a systemic problem cutting across whole ecosystems. So, with that global context in mind, the real 5-alarm fire bells started ringing when scientists found the exact same pattern in places we all thought were immune. So let's look at the evidence coming straight from the heart of the tropics. Let's take the Tiputini Biodiversity Station in Ecuador. I mean, this place is the dictionary definition of a pristine, intact rainforest. But even here, long-term studies showed a jaw-dropping 50% drop in the number of birds they were seeing over just 2 decades. Just let that sink in for a second. In 20 years, half the birds vanished. And nope, this wasn't just a one-off. Over in Panama's Soberania National Park, another place that's supposed to be a safe refuge, the data was even more terrifying. Over 40 years, a full 70% of the bird species they studied were in decline. And for most of those species, their populations had been cut in half. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. So when you lay out all the evidence, from Ecuador to Panama to the central Amazon in Brazil, you see this really clear, really disturbing pattern. We're seeing major long-term declines in these supposedly protected forests. But look closely at that last row, the one from Brazil. There's a critical detail there. The birds that are most affected are the insectivores, the ones that hunt for insects on or near the forest floor. And that is our next big clue. So if it's not the obvious stuff like logging, then what is it? Well, all the evidence is starting to point to a suspect that's totally invisible. One that can cross any park boundary without a problem: climate change. The prime suspect has been identified. And here, right here, is the smoking gun. A massive 27-year study in the Amazon finally connected the dots. Researchers figured out that hotter, drier conditions were just devastating for the birds living in the forest understory. Yep, those exact same insect eaters we were just talking about. Their model predicted that just a 1 degree Celsius bump in temperature during the dry season could cause the annual survival rate for these birds to crash by a shocking 63%. So how does this actually play out? Well, it's like a devastating chain reaction. First, the climate gets warmer, and the dry seasons get longer and harsher. Second, this causes the insect populations that the birds absolutely depend on for food to just disappear. And then third, with their main food source gone, the birds just can't make it. Their populations plummet. It's a tragic, simple cascade. And get this, it's pretty amazing. There's even evidence of this stress written on the birds' own bodies. Other studies found that over these same decades, many of these Amazonian bird species are physically changing. They're developing smaller bodies and longer wings. This is a classic evolutionary adaptation to heat stress. A smaller body gets rid of heat more easily, and longer wings make flying more efficient, which saves precious energy in a much tougher world.
But, like any good detective story, there's a plot twist. It's not that simple. The situation isn't the same everywhere. The impact of this invisible threat really depends on the specific local conditions on the ground.
So, for example, a study from Manu National Park in Peru found something totally different. On the one hand, you've got these sharp declines in the drier forests in Ecuador, Panama, and Brazil, but over in Manu, which is a much wetter floodplain forest, the bird community was found to be pretty much stable over the last 40 years. So what does that tell us? It suggests that local moisture can act as a kind of buffer, creating a small-scale refuge from the worst effects of rising temperatures. And it's this complexity that led one of the key researchers, Jared Wolf, to describe the problem like this. He said it feels like a non-point source, a wicked complex problem. And what he means is it's not a single thing you can point to and fix, like stopping one logging truck. It's the fundamental biological web that holds the whole ecosystem together that's starting to unravel. A park fence can't stop a drought. So if a line on a map isn't enough anymore, what do? It's clear that we have to start rethinking what a refuge really is and what conservation needs to look like in the era of climate change. So here's the new conservation playbook. First, the big one, the foundation for everything. We have to cut greenhouse gas emissions to stabilize the climate. But on the ground, moisture is everything. That means protecting tall forest canopies and the areas along rivers to keep things humid. It means connecting our protected areas so birds can actually move between these cooler, wetter microrefuges. And finally, it means we have to do a better job monitoring these changes and actively protecting their insect prey from other threats, like light pollution from nearby oil and gas flares. And so, that leaves us with this really big, critical question. The evidence is clear. Our last, best wild places are vulnerable. If drawing a line on a map can no longer protect a forest from the biggest threat it faces, then what does it truly mean to protect a place anymore?